Mays Jr. was shot and killed.
2 African-American men dead at a place where they claim to be working for Black Lives Matter, but they're gone. They're dead now. And we've had multiple other incidents: assaults, rape, robbery, and shootings. And so I can tell you that I think enough is enough. I absolutely do.
And so the police, who had been ordered to surrender their precinct, were ordered to take it back. It took a couple kids' lives and untold amounts of suffering to remember what our leaders should have known all along, that in the real world there have to be rules and boundaries and laws, or else people die. So yes, we've decided that we no longer feel the need to stop anyone from doing anything. Tolerance, indulgence, taken to absurd extremes, become cruelty. And so it is that a make-believe self-declared autonomous zone, free of the shackles of police and government for a time, trying to make up its own rules as it went, trying to reinvent everything, can become a hellhole of fear and misery and intimidation. It's a fitting analogy for an entire city being reimagined in real time, with very real consequences for real lives. A sloppy revolution without a blueprint. A mess. The county courthouse has stood there on 3rd Avenue for 104 years, a symbol of justice. In recent years, it's become a symbol of something else, because now we can't seem to protect the courthouse, both the place where it stands and the reason it stands. Jurors are regularly harassed, even attacked as they arrive to do their civic duty at the King County Courthouse.
This is unacceptable. We have reached a crisis point.
They've complained, and judges have complained, for good reason. In November, public defender Kevin McCabe was attacked and beaten on the street right in front of the courthouse. He was punched again and again. One night, a man broke into the building and menaced security guards, saying, "Unless you kill me, I'll keep coming in." At one point, County Council member Kathy Lambert actually suggested that we move the courthouse because we're no longer capable of controlling the situation around it.
It's time that we move the courthouse closer to the people and in a place where people will be safe to come.
It's so bad they had to close down the main entrance. Judge Sean O'Donnell asked a piercing question.
It is not working what we've got going on right here. Does someone have to die for there to be a response? I don't know.
Seattle still hasn't answered that question. On September 29th, a woman was on the corner of 3rd and James. She was trying to figure out where the new entrance to the courthouse was. 2 men were looking at her, talking about something. The woman was looking down at her phone. One man gave the other a cigarette, and then Menelik Bakel unleashed a savage punch.
And I didn't see the man, I didn't see anything. I was just, you're looking and then you're smashed. There is a hit on the side of your face so powerful that it explodes in your head. I perhaps lost consciousness for a second or two because I fell, and I see it's that moment of shock.
A Metro bus driver saw it happen and said she went face first straight down into the sidewalk, and I thought it looked like she could have been killed, and he just kept on walking. He never even looked back at her. He just kept walking down the street. That witness called it the most vicious thing he'd ever seen. The people around the woman, as she lay on the ground, acted as though it's something they see all the time, because they do. Police caught Menelik Bakel a little later. He told one officer, "The voices in my head told me to do something to her." Elena Booker suffered a broken nose, a gash on her forehead, but she's tough, stoic, she calls herself.
I'm not traumatized. I don't have fears. I walk normally. I don't, jump when somebody passes by. And I don't have PTSD from this.
Turns out Mr. Bakel's last known residence was at the Morrison. Turns out he always does this sort of thing, and the system in place always puts him out there again. He's a 3-time convicted felon for assault. He's been arrested 36 times since 2002. And maybe you'll find this to be somehow symbolic. Remember the public defender who was attacked and beaten? on camera, in front of witnesses, right in front of our symbol of justice and order, the King County Courthouse. The attacker's name is Frank Hippolyte, and he was never charged. But maybe the scariest situation is inside the courthouse, because in the increasingly rare cases that charges are actually filed by the King County prosecutor and city attorney, there is pressure on judges to hand down lenient sentences or no sentences. Retired Judge Ed McKenna knows what happens when you push back against that pressure.
At some point, you have to make a determination to protect the public. And when you see a person that has 60, 70, 80 actual convictions in violent offenses, at some point you have to make a determination to protect the public.
It works like this. In a given case, let's say, for instance, the case of Francisco Calderon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Calderon.
Who followed a guy on Broadway for a while and then walked up unprovoked and smashed him in the face with a fist. The prosecutor these days, City Attorney Pete Holmes, will recommend a sentence, and so will the defense attorney. In this case, even though Calderon had been committing crimes for years with an astounding 72 convictions, Holmes recommended that he be released and given probation. The defense attorney also recommended that he be released and given probation. For a judge to go very far outside of those recommendations is, shall we say, politically dangerous. But this time, in the Calderon case, one judge broke ranks.
You had a belly full at one point, didn't you?
I did.
You made you made a stand.
I drew attention to what was happening in Seattle. When a person has 72 actual convictions, that's not counting arrests. That's actual times a person has been convicted, and many of those are violent offenses. It's time to draw attention to what's actually happening in Seattle. I'm not sure I have ever seen a more significant history of violent offenses. Everything in that history tells me that Mr. Calderon is a violent offender and is going to reoffend.
He sent Calderon to jail for the maximum 364 days. City Attorney Pete Holmes was furious. Como's Matt Markovich spoke to him after the verdict.
And we'd still go back to the same, let's lock him up. And then we're surprised when, completely unsupported, a homeless man with mental health issues and chemical addictions repeats. What a surprise.
So Holmes retaliated by teaming up with the head of public defense, Anita Khandelwal. The same Anita Khandelwal who said in a King County annual report that one of her goals is, quote, partnering with community allies to push for a divestment from the criminal legal system. They issued a joint public rebuke of Judge McKenna, questioning his ability to be impartial and asking him to step aside as presiding judge, in their words, so that your conduct does not further tarnish the reputations of your fellow judges.
By making that public, by joining forces, so to speak, against an elected official, they're pretty much telling the public, don't vote for this person in the future. We want to ruin his political career because he's not playing ball with us.
Here's why that's so devastating. Every defense attorney has an opportunity to file what's called an affidavit of prejudice if they don't like the judge that's been assigned to their case. It bars that judge from hearing the case. After the city attorney and the head of public defense issued their rebuke, it happened a lot to Judge McKenna. Hundreds of times. For example, in May alone, there were 128 affidavits of prejudice filed against him, just 15 for all the other judges combined. If you didn't know better, you'd think maybe there was something fishy going on. And so when a 20-year-old man named Sabono Wako was arrested for unlawfully carrying a .45 caliber Glock, and when it was learned that Wako had several outstanding misdemeanors, that he'd been charged twice for firearm-related offenses, and that he had an unresolved felony case for possessing a stolen gun in Snohomish County, the defense attorney, fearing a stiff sentence for their client, filed an affidavit of prejudice against Judge McKenna. And so a different judge heard the case, and Wako was given 4 days in custody, which he'd already served, and sent to social services. He was told the case would be dismissed if he stayed out of trouble. But he didn't stay out of trouble. On New Year's Eve, Sabono Wako got another gun and fired multiple shots into a crowd of people. He hit a 24-year-old man, Taysho Malay. Then as Male tried to get up, Waco shot him again in the back. Tayshaun Male later died at Harborview Medical Center.
It's not always about offenders. It's about protecting the community. And right now, I think there's a lot of frustration because the community doesn't really feel like they're being protected.
The fight for the soul of Seattle is a philosophical divide. It's a perfect storm here, really. Prosecutors that don't prosecute, a city council that doesn't want them to, judges that are lenient because they damned well better be, county executives shutting down jails, cops that have been undermined, and services that nibble around the edges of a crisis because we can't seem to get it through our heads that the drugs are too strong, too barbaric to fight with hopes and wishes and Seattle's special brand of compassion.